Modern Queen Tales presents A Ghost's Law. The neon owl thrummed with a heavy synthetic bass beat. Neon purple lights slashed across the faces of the weekend crowd, illuminating the damp condensation on hundreds of glass tumblers. The air smelled of spilled gin, expensive cologne, and desperate ambition. I sat in a curved leather booth, nursing a vodka soda. Lana leaned across the sticky mahogany table, pointing a manicured finger toward the dartboard. Look at the trio in the corner. Suits, nice watches, potential. I followed her gaze. The three men laughed too loudly, tossing darts with sloppy aggression. I scanned their hands. Married, I said. All three of them. Aubrey scoffed, adjusting the strap of her silk top. You can't possibly know that from here. I can, I said. The tall one has a pale indentation on his left ring finger. He took his band off in the cab ride over. The guy in the middle keeps checking his phone with his screen angled down, hiding the notifications. The third one has baby spit up on the lapel of his blazer. They are looking for a weekend distraction. Pass. Lana sighed, turning her attention to the bar. Fine. What about those two? The ones with the craft beers. I looked over. Gay. Look at their feet. They are pointing directly at each other, excluding the rest of the room. They are entirely focused on their own conversation. They have zero interest in anyone else. Aubrey slammed her hands on the table. Okay, Sherlock. Find someone. Anyone. I scanned the room again. My eyes landed on a man slipping into a booth near the exit. Cal Russo, I said. Ooh, he's cute, Lana said. Go talk to him. I arrested him 6 months ago for soliciting a prostitute on 4th Avenue, I replied, taking a sip of my drink. He cried in the back of my cruiser. Lana threw her hands up. You are officially a buzzkill, Pam. You cannot turn off the detective brain for one single night. I analyze my environment. It keeps me alive. It keeps you single, Aubrey countered, sliding out of the booth. I'm getting another drink. Try to find a man who isn't a criminal or a cheater before I get back. I watched her walk away, feeling the familiar prickle of annoyance. They wanted a fun, reckless night. I saw the world in threat assessments, behavioral tics, and hidden motives. I let my gaze drift along the polished length of the bar. Then, I saw him. He sat at the far end of the counter, bathed in the dim amber glow of a solitary hanging bulb. He wore a charcoal gray suit, tailored to the exact specifications of his broad shoulders. He held a crystal tumbler filled with a dark liquid and a single square ice cube. He radiated absolute stillness. While the rest of the bar vibrated with chaotic energy, he sat like a statue carved from obsidian. I studied his face, strong jawline, sharp cheekbones, dark hair swept back. I searched for a tell, a nervous twitch, a glance at a watch, a subtle shift in posture. Nothing. He simply observed the mirror behind the bar. I could not read him. He possessed an impenetrable surface. Lana leaned in, following my line of sight. A wicked smile spread across her face. Now that is a man. Look at him. He screams danger. He screams discipline. I corrected. I dare you, Lana whispered. Go over there. Buy him a drink. Use your legendary interrogation skills to get his number. I looked back at him. The challenge ignited a spark in my chest. I thrived on solving puzzles, and the man at the bar presented an intricate, flawless enigma. I stood up, smoothing the front of my black dress. I crossed the crowded floor, my heels clicking softly against the sticky floorboards. I stopped right next to him. I registered the subtle scent of sandalwood and expensive bourbon. You look like a man who appreciates good whiskey, I said, pitching my voice to cut through the bass. Can I buy your next round? He turned his head. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, a piercing, heavy gray. He looked at me. He did not smile. He did not frown. He held my gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then, he placed a $100 bill on the bar, stood up, and walked toward the exit. He moved with a silent, fluid grace, slipping through the dense crowd without touching a single person. I stood at the bar, the rejection burning hot in my cheeks. He completely dismissed me. I watched the heavy wooden door swing shut behind him. The enigma remained unsolved. The next day, the smell of copper hit me the moment I stepped out of the elevator. The penthouse apartment on the 42nd floor of the Arcadia Tower commanded a spectacular view of the city skyline. Right now, the view competed with a massive pool of blood soaking into a white Persian rug. "Victim is Joel Lancaster," Detective Reynolds said, reading from his notepad as I ducked under the yellow police tape. 68 years old, retired state judge. Found by his housekeeper 20 minutes ago. Throat slashed. I snapped a pair of blue latex gloves onto my hands and approached the body. Lancaster lay on his back. His eyes stared blindly at the vaulted ceiling. The cut was precise, deep, and fatal. A single, clean stroke, from left to right. "Professionally done," I murmured, examining the edges of the wound. No defensive wounds on his hands. He didn't fight back. He didn't even see it coming. "Security downstairs," says Lancaster, "had no scheduled visitors," Reynolds added. "The private elevator requires a key card." The killer bypassed the lobby security, rode the service elevator, picked a biometric lock on the back door, and walked right in. I stood up, scanning the immaculate living room, checked the cameras, the service elevator, the hallway, the loading dock. A ghost didn't do this. Someone walked in, and someone walked out. 10 minutes later, I stood in the building's security hub, staring at a bank of glowing monitors. The building manager, a sweating man with a comb-over, tapped frantically on his keyboard. "Here," the manager squeaked. "Service elevator at 2:15 a.m. I leaned close to the screen. The black and white footage showed the metal doors sliding open. A man stepped inside. He wore a dark raincoat over a tailored suit. He stood perfectly still in the center of the elevator. As the doors closed, he lifted his head and looked directly into the camera lens. My breath caught in my throat. Storm cloud eyes, sharp jaw, absolute stillness. It was the man from the Neon Owl. He looked into the lens with chilling indifference. He offered his face to the digital record. He wanted us to see him. "Freeze that frame," I commanded. "Print it. Get me a high-res digital copy on a flash drive right now." I grabbed the printed image from the machine. I stared at his face. The sting of rejection from the bar morphed into a cold, sharp focus. I had a target. I had a face. I was going to hunt him down. The precinct hummed with the low, steady noise of ringing phones and clacking keyboards. The clock on the wall read 3 a.m. Empty coffee cups lined the edge of my desk like a defensive wall. I stared at the computer monitor until my eyes burned. I fed the high-resolution image of his face into the National Facial Recognition Database. 0 hits. I ran it through Interpol, the DMV, and the local mugshot archives. Nothing. The forensics team pulled a single, perfect thumbprint from the brass handle of Lancaster's back door. I ran the print through the APHIS database. The system returned a blank screen, no matches. I tapped a pencil against my teeth. The situation defied logic. In the modern world, everyone leaves a digital footprint. People have driver's licenses, tax records, credit cards, social media profiles, birth certificates. This man existed as a total void. He breathed oxygen, he drank expensive bourbon, he possessed the physical strength and tactical skill to execute a high-profile homicide in a secure building, but on paper, he did not exist. I pulled up the video file again. I played the 15-second clip of him in the elevator. I watched it 20 times. I looked for a scar, a tattoo, a limp, any identifying physical characteristic. He stood with perfect military posture. He held his hands loosely at his sides. I paused the video at the exact moment he reached up to adjust the collar of his raincoat. I zoomed in on his right hand. A ring caught the harsh light of the elevator bulb. I enhanced the image, sharpening the pixels. It was a heavy, vintage signet ring cast in dark gold. The face of the ring bore a distinct, intricate crest. I leaned so close to the monitor my nose brushed the glass. I saw an eagle with its wings spread, gripping a shattered sword in its talons. I grabbed my mouse and opened a new tab. I bypassed the police databases and accessed the local historical archives. I typed in search parameters for heraldry, crests, and wealthy families from the city's founding era. For 2 hours, I sifted through scanned documents, old newspaper clippings, and aristocratic registries. At 5:15 a.m., I found a match. The crest belonged to the Saint Jude family. I clicked the link, bringing up a digitized article from 30 years ago. The headline blared in thick black font, "Saint Jude Manor destroyed in blaze. Entire family perishes." I read the text. The Saint Jude family held immense wealth, controlling shipping routes and real estate across the eastern seaboard. A massive fire engulfed their estate in the middle of the night. The police ruled it an accident, a faulty gas line. The parents, Elias and Martha, died in their sleep. The article mentioned a single child, a 7-year-old boy named Adam. The authorities never found his remains, but the intense heat of the fire led the coroner to declare him legally dead alongside his parents. I pulled up the legal records following the fire. The massive St. Jude fortune went into probate. The state appointed a judge to oversee the liquidation and distribution of the assets. The judge's name was Joel Lancaster. I sat back in my chair. The pieces snapped together with a violent click. Joel Lancaster ruled over the estate. He carved up the St. Jude empire and distributed the wealth to a network of local businessmen, politicians, and police officials. They stole the fortune. They orchestrated the fire. They murdered the family. But they missed the boy. The boy survived. He spent 30 years in the shadows, stripping away his identity, turning himself into a ghost. Now he was back. He possessed a face, a tailored suit, and a blade. He started his execution list with the man who slammed the gavel. I needed to find the manor. I pulled up the property records for the burned estate. The city never seized the land. The title remained locked in a dormant shell corporation tied to the original family trust. The address sat on the extreme northern edge of the city limits, bordered by dense woods and an abandoned quarry. I grabbed my jacket and checked the magazine in my Glock 19. I slammed it back into the grip, holstering the weapon at my hip. The ghost had a name. I was going to meet Adam Saint Jude. The rain started as I hit the city limits. Heavy, gray sheets of water lashed against my windshield, turning the winding dirt road into a slick ribbon of mud. The dense canopy of ancient oak trees blocked out the morning sun, plunging the woods into a deep, greenish twilight. The road ended at a pair of rusted iron gates. Beyond the gates, the ruins of the St. Jude Manor loomed in the fog. The fire consumed the east wing entirely, leaving a charred, skeletal frame of blackened timber. The west wing remained standing, a decaying structure of cracked stone and ivy-choked windows. I parked my cruiser, killed the engine, and stepped out into the rain. I drew my weapon. I kept my finger resting just outside the trigger guard. I moved with slow, deliberate steps, letting the soft mud muffle my approach. I climbed the stone steps to the massive oak front door. It hung slightly open, the heavy brass hinges groaning in the wind. I pushed it wider with the barrel of my gun. The interior smelled of wet ash, rotting wood, and damp earth. I swept my flashlight across the grand foyer, Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. A shattered chandelier lay in a heap of crystal dust on the marble floor. I moved down the main hallway, clearing the empty drawing rooms and the ruined dining hall. I approached a heavy mahogany door at the end of the corridor. A thin sliver of light leaked from beneath the frame. I pressed my back against the wall. I reached out, turned the brass knob, and pushed the door open. I swung into the room, leveling my weapon. "Don't move," I commanded, my voice echoing in the large, book-lined study. He sat in a cracked leather armchair near a large bay window. The gray light illuminated his face. He wore a dark sweater and black tactical pants. He held a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid. He looked at the barrel of my gun with complete calm. "You have a very particular way of walking, detective," he said. His voice rumbled through the room, a deep, resonant sound, like velvet sliding over gravel. "A slight shift in weight on your left heel. I recognized your gait the moment you walked into the bar." I kept the sights of my Glock centered on his chest. "Put the glass down. Keep your hands where I can see them." He took a slow sip of his bourbon. He set the glass on a small wooden table next to his chair. He rested his hands on his knees. "I left the bar because I saw the badge clipped to your belt under your jacket. I saw the intelligence in your eyes. I didn't want to have to kill a good cop. You killed Joel Lancaster." "Joel Lancaster signed the order that locked me inside my bedroom while my parents burned alive," Adam said. He stated the fact with terrifying neutrality. "He took $20 million in kickbacks for liquidating my family's assets. He earned his death. You don't get to act as judge and executioner, Adam. You're coming with me." He smiled, a cold, sharp expression that transformed his face into a predatory mask. "I wanted you to find me, Pam. I wanted a smart, clean detective to follow the breadcrumbs. I left my face on that camera for you." "Why?" "Because you cannot bring me into your precinct," he said, leaning forward. "Your house is dirty. The people you report to wear the same blood on their hands as Joel Lancaster. My department has nothing to do with a 30-year-old murder." Adam reached into the pocket of his tactical pants. My finger tensed on the trigger. He moved slowly, extracting a small black, leather-bound book. He tossed it across the room. It landed at my feet. "Pick it up," he instructed. "Open to page 42. I kept the gun aimed at him. I crouched, maintaining visual contact, and scooped the book off the floor with my left hand. I flipped the heavy parchment pages with my thumb. I reached page 42. The page contained a handwritten ledger. Columns of dates and massive monetary figures lined the paper. At the bottom of the page, authorizing a transfer of $500,000 from the Lancaster Trust, sat a signature I recognized instantly. "Captain Marcus Pratt, my commanding officer." I stared at the ink. The loop of the M and the sharp angle of the P matched the signature on every single one of my performance reviews. "Your captain ran the operational security for the syndicate that carved up my city," Adam said softly. "He organized the fire. He paid the arsonists. He covered the tracks. He used my family's money to buy his rank." A cold dread pooled in my stomach. The certainty of my world cracked. Before I could speak, a piercing wail shattered the silence of the woods. Sirens, multiple vehicles, screaming up the dirt road toward the manor. "I didn't call for backup," I said, my voice tight. "I know," Adam replied, standing up. "Captain Pratt tracks the GPS in your cruiser. He monitors your database searches. He saw you dig into the Saint Jude file. He knows you found the connection to Lancaster. He sent them to kill me, and he sent them to kill you. You are a loose end." Red and blue lights slashed through the bay window, throwing wild shadows across the study walls. Tires crunched on the gravel outside. I heard the sharp, metallic clack of assault rifles racking rounds into the chamber. They have the front locked down, Adam stated, moving swiftly toward the back of the room. He pushed a heavy bookcase aside, revealing a dark, narrow passage cut into the stone wall. We have exactly 30 seconds before they breach the door and fill this room with lead. I looked at the ledger in my hand. I looked at the man I hunted. I looked at the flashing lights of my own department outside the window. The rules I lived by dissolved in an instant. Justice no longer resided in the badge I carried. Justice stood in the secret passage, waiting for me. I lowered my weapon. I slipped the ledger into my jacket pocket. I sprinted across the room. Adam pulled me into the darkness of the tunnel. He grabbed the edge of the bookcase and shoved it back into place, sealing us inside just as the front door of the manor splintered under the force of a battering ram. We ran through the subterranean darkness. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and old roots. Adam moved with practiced certainty, navigating the lightless corridor without hesitation. I followed the sound of his footsteps, my hand gripping my weapon, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Where does this go?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "An old bootlegger exit," he replied over his shoulder. "It empties into the quarry 3 miles north. They won't find it." We moved in silence for 20 minutes. The air grew colder, carrying the sharp scent of pine and rain. The tunnel ended at a rusted iron grate. Adam shoved it open with a brutal thrust of his shoulder. We scrambled out into the stormy night. The rain soaked through my jacket instantly. We stood on the edge of a deep, flooded limestone quarry. The dark water churned under the heavy downpour. Adam turned to me. Rainwater plastered his dark hair to his forehead. He looked at me with those intense, gray eyes. "You chose the ghost over the badge," he said. "The badge lied to me," I answered, wiping the water from my face. "Pratt murdered your family. He stole your life. He tried to kill me. The badge means nothing right now. I want the syndicate." "The syndicate controls the courts, the docks, and the precinct," Adam stated. "They have money, guns, and absolute authority. Taking them down requires stepping outside the law." "I know." He stepped closer. The proximity sent a sudden jolt of electricity through my nervous system. I felt the heat radiating from his body. I felt the raw, dangerous power coiled within him. "We do this together," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "I know the targets. You know the police tactics. We dismantle them piece by piece." I looked up at him. The attraction I felt in the bar returned, magnified 100 times by the adrenaline and the shared danger. He was a weapon forged in fire and grief, and he was offering me the handle. "Where do we start?" I asked. For 3 weeks, we lived in the shadows. Adam secured a safe house in the industrial district, a massive, echoing warehouse filled with shipping containers and surveillance equipment. We slept on cots, drank black coffee, and waged a silent war against the people who owned the city. The dynamic between us crackled with unspoken tension. We spent hours hunched over blueprints and tactical maps. Our shoulders brushed, our fingers grazed when passing documents. I caught him watching me when he thought I focused on the monitors. I felt the weight of his stare like a physical touch. We struck with surgical precision. I used my knowledge of police dispatch protocols to create blind spots in the city's patrol grid. I rerouted cruisers, delayed response times, and severed communication lines. Adam executed the physical operations. We hit their money first. Adam infiltrated a secure offshore banking hub in the financial district, siphoning $30 million from the syndicate's accounts and distributing it to hundreds of local charities. I watched the operation through a hacked security camera, marveling at his fluid, ghost-like movements. He slipped past armed guards, bypassed biometric scanners, and vanished before the alarms ever sounded. Next, we hit their supply lines. The syndicate smuggled narcotics through the eastern shipping docks. I mapped the patrol routes of the corrupt Port Authority officers. Adam rigged the main cargo crane with explosives, dropping 4 tons of illegal narcotics into the bottom of the harbor in front of a dozen screaming, helpless guards. Panic spread through the corrupt precinct. Captain Pratt bled authority. His superiors demanded answers. His soldiers demanded protection. We gave them paranoia. I leaked pages of the Saint Jude ledger to a network of independent journalists. The daily papers ran front-page exposes detailing the kickbacks, the bribes, and the cover-ups. Warrants flew. Federal investigators swarmed the precinct. The syndicate fractured under the pressure. The members turned on each other, offering testimonies to save their own skins. The final target remained Captain Pratt. We tracked him to a private airfield on the outskirts of the city. He planned to board a chartered jet and vanish into a non-extradition country. He carried a silver briefcase containing $2 million in untraceable diamonds. Adam and I arrived as the jet's engines spooled up. The tarmac was slick with rain. Pratt walked briskly toward the boarding stairs, flanked by 2 armed mercenaries. "Take the guards," Adam commanded over our comms channel. "Leave Pratt to me." I stepped out from behind a fuel truck. I leveled my Glock. I fired 2 suppressed rounds. The first round shattered the knee of the guard on the left. The second round tore through the shoulder of the guard on the right. They dropped to the tarmac, their weapons clattering across the wet concrete. Pratt froze. He dropped the silver briefcase and reached for his sidearm. Adam materialized from the shadows beneath the wing of the jet. He moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed Pratt's wrist, twisting it sharply. A loud snap echoed over the whine of the engines. Pratt screamed, dropping his gun. Adam kicked the back of Pratt's knees, sending the captain crashing to the asphalt. Adam stood over him. He drew a long, curved hunting knife from a sheath on his thigh. I ran across the tarmac, my gun still raised. I reached them just as Adam pressed the edge of the blade against Pratt's throat. 30 years, Pratt," Adam whispered, his voice cutting through the roar of the jet. 30 years in the dark. Pratt sobbed, his face pale and twisted in terror. "Please, I have money. I can give you everything." Adam pressed the blade harder. A thin line of crimson appeared on Pratt's neck. "Adam," I said. My voice was calm, steady. He looked at me. His eyes raged with a violent, consuming storm. The ghost wanted blood. He wanted the final piece of his vengeance. "You killed Lancaster," I said, stepping closer. "You took the money. You destroyed the syndicate. You won. If you slit his throat now, you give the feds a murder victim. You give them a martyr. Let him rot in a federal maximum security prison for the rest of his miserable life. Let him lose his power, his freedom, and his name." Adam held my gaze. The tension stretched, vibrating like a plucked wire. He looked down at the pathetic, weeping man beneath him. The storm in his eyes slowly settled. The rage gave way to a cold, enduring iron. He pulled the blade away. He sheathed the knife. He stepped back. "He's yours, detective," Adam said. I pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from my belt. I walked over to my former captain. I grabbed his unbroken arm, wrenched it behind his back, and locked the steel cuffs around his wrists. "Captain Pratt," I said, reciting the words with deep, profound satisfaction. "You have the right to remain silent." The city breathed a collective sigh of relief. The federal indictment swept through the precinct like a hurricane. Dozens of corrupt officers faced trial. The syndicate collapsed into ruin. The journalists hailed the anonymous leaks as the greatest act of vigilantism in the city's history. I stood on the wooden planks of the eastern pier. The ocean breeze whipped my hair across my face. The lights of the skyline reflected on the black surface of the water. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. That same, silent, predatory grace. Adam walked to the edge of the pier. He wore a simple black jacket and dark jeans. He looked out at the water, his profile sharp against the city glow. "The feds seized the ledger," I said, stepping up beside him. Pratt is locked in a solitary cell in a supermax facility. The prosecutor says he'll never see the sky again. Good, Adam replied. We stood in silence for a long moment. The air between us crackled with the familiar, heavy electricity. The war ended. The mission finished. The ghost had no reason to stay. I bought a boat, Adam said softly. It sits in a marina down the coast, fully fueled. Untraceable registration. I plan to sail south, Caribbean, maybe further. He looked at me. The invitation hung in the air, thick and undeniable. I unclipped the police badge from my belt. The heavy silver shield felt cold in my hand. I looked at the inscribed numbers. I thought about the corruption I witnessed, the system that failed, and the man who stepped out of the shadows to fix it. I tossed the badge into the dark water. It sank without a sound. I turned to Adam. I closed the distance between us. I looked up into his storm cloud eyes. Adam Saint Jude, I said, my voice steady. You are still under arrest for the murder of Joel Lancaster. He smirked. A slow, dangerous, blindingly attractive smile spread across his face. He leaned in close. I felt his breath warm against my cheek. I inhaled the scent of sandalwood and danger. Then you'd better start the paperwork, detective, he whispered, his lips grazing my jawline. It's going to be a very long interrogation. He didn't run. I didn't reach for my cuffs. Instead, I grabbed the lapels of his jacket and pulled him into a fierce, consuming kiss. He responded with crushing intensity, wrapping his arms around my waist, lifting me against him. The kiss tasted of adrenaline, victory, and the promise of absolute freedom. We broke apart, breathing heavily. He took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. We turned away from the water. We walked off the pier, disappearing into the neon glow of the city lights together. The detective and the ghost, ready to rewrite the rules of justice.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.